My name's Alex, and today I'm joined by Dr. Stuart Grice. It's quite exciting today because we're going to give quite a definitive answer to quite a divisive topic and divisive subject, and that is the topic of the carnivore diet versus the vegan diet. By a brief means of introduction, my name's Alex. I'm effectively the host of Trait Talking with Fitness Genes, but today, importantly, I'm joined by Dr. Stuart Grice. Dr. Grice, welcome.
Thank you very much.
If you'd just like to give a brief introduction to yourself and your background, that'd be really helpful.
Sure. So I'm a co-founder and CSO that's Chief Scientific Officer of Fitness Genes. So my background, I was a researcher for near 15 years at the University of Oxford in the Department of Functional Genomics, where I researched genetic disease, neuromuscular disease, and neurodegeneration. But I've been full-time at Fitness Genes now for over 6 years.
Great. So it's quite exciting today because we're going to give quite a definitive answer to quite a divisive topic and divisive subject, and that is the topic of the carnivore diet versus the vegan diet. So we're going to give that ultimate response of which diet is better. I believe that's the case, Stuart, right?
No pressure. Yeah, let's go.
So just as a brief intro, I guess the main claims of both sides is that they promote better health and it's a superior diet to follow for that reason. So quite extreme and polarizing in their approach and the way that they're often presented online and that type of thing. So Stuart, as a starting point, ultimately, who's right?
Yeah, well, this is going to be a 1 minute conversation. No, there's obviously more nuances to that, and we need to distill this in the back of biology. So I'm going to be bold and say carnivore, but meat eaters in general, because I think that gives a more broader term. The carnivores would be associated with that, and then veganism. Again, they're both quite broad eating. You can have a very good vegan diet and a very bad vegan diet. You can have a very good meat eating diet with you do need some fiber. You need some vegetables in. So I'm going to really stick to those extremes of a good vegan diet and a meat eater's diet with some vegetables. That's how I want to coin this. The carnivore, I think, is not sustainable in the long term. So I guess very quick answer is the carnivore diet has its merits in the short term, but in the long term, I would not advise it, and we'll get through to that. But I'm not saying don't eat meat. But I think you're very much right. You see with meat eaters and the carnivore diet, and then the vegans, they kind of claim the same territory. That good for weight loss, reduces inflammation, gives you better mental clarity, improves digestion. But where I kind of do see the separation, and when you tease through the biology in both cases, is the meat eating diet is good for strength, growth, cellular growth, and mental clarity, as the vegans are more about longevity and reduced disease risk. Now, I'm not saying the meat eaters aren't claiming longevity, but I think that's where the science is separated out into two buckets. So I guess the next thing is how do we tease this apart? What fundamentally, because you're eating different things, there's going to be a biological effect. And again, we can talk about fiber, we can talk about other components, but actually where I really see the biological effect is how it impacts a protein called IGF-1. And you'll see the vegans, and I think this is where politically the claims are also distinct as well, where the vegans are claiming that vegan diets reduce levels of IGF-1 and lower IGF-1 levels are good for long-term health. Now, the meat eaters say, and rightly say, meat diets increase the levels of IGF-1, and that's very positive for growth and muscle strength and everything else, which is good for long-term health. So let's just have a little think about IGF-1. So IGF-1 is insulin-like growth factor, similar structure to insulin, and it's the primary mediator of human growth hormone. So pituitary secretes growth hormone. You then have lots of cellular divisions, protein synthesis. And again, if you think about when you're young, this is really important. When you're growing, you want IGF-1 around your body to develop normally. And as you can imagine, IGF-1 during adolescence spikes lots. But over time, the IGF-1 levels do drop as you age. And then there's two other things that promote IGF-1 levels is exercise, because of course when you exercise you need to create repair and growth and everything else. And as we mentioned before, high protein meals raise IGF-1 levels. So you've got here a growth related pathway where vegans will have reduced levels as a group, and meat eaters, people with lots of animal protein meals, will have higher circulating levels when compared together.
Okay, so on that, I guess a couple of questions immediately. So, and this is interesting for us because we obviously have a report based on IGF-1 production, so it's quite relevant for our client base. So first of all, is it better to have higher or lower levels? And a follow-up question to that is based on the diet that someone follows, is that the only sort of factor that determines their IGF-1 activity?
Sure. Well, I guess going back to my my former job, looking at disease, is the way you understand biological pathways, or to me, is looking at the extreme cases. So two examples of disease, you've got acromegaly. So you may be aware of a chap called Andre the Giant. So I think he was in the film The Princess Bride, and he was also a famous early wrestler. So I think he was 7'4" and about, was it 520 pounds, which is about, 236 kilos or something. A very big chap. So he had a condition called acromegaly, which is a pituitary-related condition which secretes lots of growth hormone, which massively ramps up your IGF levels. So it was huge. But people with acromegaly have increased risk of cardiovascular disease, tumours, and he died, I think it was about the age of 46, of cardiac disease. Now, the flip side to that is Larsen dwarfism. So these have massively reduced levels of IGF-1. Now, these people have dwarfism. They do have cognitive deficiencies because of the poor brain development, because of the lower levels. So here you're seeing here that actually where growth is, reduced growth is negative with, hypertrophy of the heart with acromegaly, it is negative also. So here's you got the extremes where high levels can have a negative effect, low levels can have a negative effect. But with the people with Larsen syndrome, they have a massively reduced rate of cancer incidence and other chronic diseases as well. So you've got super growth, but increased risk of disease. You've got low growth that can lead to developmental diseases, but then protection from maybe diseases of the long term. And this kind of makes sense in terms of the way IGF works. So for young people, IGF's good. Good growth, good brain development, good organ development are key. Diseases of younger ages are generally developmentally derived. Now, also, IGF can boost muscle growth, and one of the claims as well from the carnivore diet and the raised IGF-1 people is actually IGF-1 helps use fat for fuel, so it can help you lose body weight, which is also positive for weight loss. However, the high IGF levels then, which promote cell division and protein synthesis, repress autophagy, which cleans up the cellular debris, which can be linked to many diseases, and apoptosis. So think about that cell death, and it's very important to kill off, say, tumour cells, for example, and you get reduced apoptosis and reduced autophagy in certain types of cancer. So you've kind of got this perspective here where the vegans are on look at the pro-autophagy apoptosis side of it, really good. And then the carnivore, the meat eaters go, look at the muscle mass impacts, which we know muscle mass is really important for longevity, and the pro fats metabolism component of it. So you've really got here a pathway that centers around decision making, around energy investment versus longevity and protection. And we know that muscle mass is important for longevity. We also know autophagy is important for protection. So we've got these two separate sides that still, you said it's going to be decisive. At the moment, we're not decisive, but we'll move on to that. So high IGF when you're young, in summary, is good. High IGF-1 when you're older may not be so good.
So on that basis, would it therefore make sense for an individual to perhaps follow a higher meat, more carnivore-based diet when they're younger, and then move on to a more plant-based vegan diet as they age and get into later life?
And I think this is a very interesting, and yeah, we're getting into the weeds now, that we should start to think about diets as not philosophies, which are all encompassing and we can't budge from, but actually part of a toolkit. And there was a study probably getting close to a decade ago, which actually looked a lot, I think it was in Cell Metabolism, which looked at reducing protein around middle age was protective of disease. But then when you're slightly older, you want to make sure you're maintaining a certain level of protein for maintaining muscle mass. And this was linked to increased human growth hormone and IGF signaling. Now, but what you got to appreciate, so IGF-1 levels decline through age. But so the theory of, okay, well, I'm old between 45 and 50 or middle age, and then I switch to being on a low meat diet. Now, if you think about what you said at the beginning in terms of there's genetics, there's a lot of genetic variants that are associated with different levels of IGF, like baseline levels of IGF. Then there's environmental things you can do. We know exercise raises levels, protein diet raises levels. There's lots of different things that can raise your IGF-1 levels. So actually, we've got to think about this on the individual, the personalised level. And you see, so there was a study done by the UK Biobank where they looked at about 400,000 people, and they really, and this is a paper that's shown that IGF-1 levels had this, what is called antagonistic pleiotropic effect, where good when you're younger, bad when you're older. But when they plotted IGF levels over the ages of 40 to 70, there were people in their 70s with higher levels of IGF than people in their 40s, which makes sense. So actually, you to go for the blanket statement of, well, if you're 50 or 60, you shouldn't be having any meat. Actually, well, if you've got very low levels of IGF, actually you want to be thinking about in terms of maintaining muscle mass. So therefore, animal protein is really important for adding to your diet at that stage to maintain muscle mass. Now, if you've got the flip side of that, where you're actually a meat eater with very high levels of IGF-1 and you're in your 40s and 50s, actually maybe moving towards more plant-based protein could be important for you, because we know that the higher circulating IGF-1 levels are going to increase risk of chronic conditions and cancer. So you've got here a way of actually personalising and understanding what your levels are. So a simple IGF-1 blood test, understanding if you want to start younger, you can start to look at your genetic risk, and you can actually use these two diets actually as a tool, as opposed to a philosophy, political philosophy. We do know that we could predict voting patterns on carnivore versus veganism, so there is a lot of political collateral to having them. I think we should step back and understand our biology and use them accordingly. And I think the vegan diet is very interesting, and a vegetarian protein, so they have different amino acid compositions. So a lot of plant proteins have low levels of methionine. Now, methionine is the first amino acid in all proteins in the cell. So proteins being the enzymes, the structural components. So if you reduce that amount, it actually mimics calorie restriction and fasting. And the studies done in animal models, it's less extrapolated to humans at the moment, that show that actually just reducing one amino acid, not protein, can actually mimic calorie restriction. And it makes sense, because you can't start protein synthesis with low levels of methionine. That then can start to drive the autophagy and the other processes that are good for maintaining longevity. But now if you're a vegan with low muscle mass and potentially low IGF levels, you've got to be thinking about long-term strength. So actually, and again, if you're vegan, because there's cultural and social reasons why you're not doing it, but you really need to be looking to getting very good vegetarian proteins into your diet. If you happen to just want to eat some eggs or some fish or something, that would be great. But in reality, these people aren't going to do that. So you've got to look at particular blends of vegetarian protein where you have increased levels of leucine, increased levels of methionine, that actually can promote protein synthesis and raise these IGF-1 levels a bit higher. So you've really got this toolkit here with these two diets. Instead of being one is going to enable me to live forever, actually go, okay, well, what's my status biologically, muscle mass, IGF-1 levels, even testosterone levels as well, and assess the situation and add these components in. And I'll say components because the extremes of both of these diets are not ideal, to then promote how you can improve your health.
So it sounds like, as quite a general rule, following a diet that promotes IGF-1 activity when you're younger, and I'd like to sort of clarify what we mean by sort of like young and what age that kind of that I guess changes is beneficial in terms of that development. But then moving on to a more plant-based diet is potentially more beneficial to reduce risk of disease later in life. However, within that, there is still individual differences that need to be accounted for, and it's not that following that general rule it is going to be applicable for everyone.
Yeah, sure. And I think touch on what, because we've got customers and we talk to personal trainers who are working with clients, and they'll be in their 50s and they'll again claim they're incredibly healthy, they're incredibly strong. But the danger is they can continue, and you think about a period of time that you see all these little white boxes on the internet, is eat 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal, exercise 4 to 5 times a week, do these 5 or 6 things, and then happy days, you're super healthy. But we know there's periods of time when someone may not be exercising for health reasons, they're under the weather, or they're just very busy, and continually just to eat the protein in your meals during that period of time may not be ideal. Now, of course, longer term, if you're not exercising, there's a whole barrage of issues with that, with muscle mass loss, VO2 max issues. But in terms of thinking about, okay, well, actually, maybe there's a few weeks where I do not need to be having my 20 to 30 grams of protein if I'm not going to be doing the exercise, because there is this secondary problem. And they show very much with the high protein meal, particularly animal protein, it will spike your IGF. And over time, they believe you can start to get chronically high levels if you continue to eat those meals. And if you haven't got it's kind of like teenagers hanging around the shops. If they've got nothing to do, i.e. build muscle, then they're going to start causing trouble. And that trouble can be a chronic disease on a cellular sense. So you've really got to think about your body as a dynamic system, and understand at those moments in your life when you may need to make changes, make changes to your diet. If longevity is your thing, if eating meat diets with a nice glass of wine is what floats your boat, then I'm not denying anyone of that. But if you're claiming longevity, this is the way you got to think about it.
And I guess that's the question is, with these sort of approaches to particular diets being so ingrained, how easy do you think it is to get people to sort of change their thinking on this?
I think culturally this is the problem. But I think I'm not here to tell you what religion that you follow or what political party you vote for. I'm just here to describe the biological pathway that underpins, or one of the many biological pathways that underpins longevity, how these two diets can impact it, what are the negative components of those diets, and then if you choose to think about your longevity above everything else, here's the information, and this is what you should do. But yeah, I totally agree. Like we mentioned it before, you can predict voting patterns on carnivores versus vegans. Actually, vegan is a term to describe the left, for example. So there is a huge, political collateral behind which camp you're in. However, as a biologist, you're just describing how eating a high vegetable diet with no meat impacts your body, and eating a high meat diet with minimal vegetables impacts your diet. IGF-1 is central to that process. IGF-1 is great for growth. It's not great for long-term health. It has this antagonistic effect where too high levels when you're older increases your risk of chronic disease, but lower levels when you're younger increases your risk of developmental diseases.
Great. So just to round it off, I think it'd be useful just to help people understand how they can kind of make that assessment and understand their personal IGF-1 activity and use that to inform decisions they make. So you've touched upon blood tests, so that's an option that people can go down. DNA testing is obviously an option that we facilitate. I know through our own test that I've got lower production of IGF-1, so that's something that I can use moving forward to inform my own choices as well. Is there anything else that people can do beyond that, or are those the two kind of main methods?
So it's more how you interpret them. So when you're younger, you're not, because obviously you have high levels of IGF-1. If you're eating meat, exercising, and younger, you're going to have high IGF-1 levels, but that's fine. So what you got to do is look at your long-term trajectory. So genetics is a component of, are you more likely to have longer-term higher circulating levels? So there's variants that sit within enhancers and certain bits of the DNA which lead to epigenetic upregulation of IGF-1 over time. So these, you can start to think about this, okay, well, I don't need to be driving IGF levels to the nth degree. Of course, as you get older, blood tests are the most objective way of finding out what your IGF-1 levels, but also you can look at genetic variants associated with increased risks of certain conditions as well, and IGF variants are associated with many of these chronic conditions, so that can then help you evaluate the risk. So it's kind of assessing where you are in terms of your blood levels, but also assessing your medium long-term risk in terms of your genetics. Then of course there's you know what you're eating, you know what your body composition is, you know if you're exercising and lifting weights, so those bits, you know if you're getting good sleep, so those bits are all part of the package.
Yeah, it's just whether people are actually making that assessment or whether we're just making that assumption.
Well, we're here to help.
Yeah, and that's a nice point. Would you like to direct people towards our website and tell them where they can
Of course, yeah. So we have many traits associated with risk of different conditions, but also IGF-1 as an example. We've got testosterone as well. So combined IGF and high testosterone, very high testosterone are risk factors of particular cancers too. So we're a wellness company, but you can see how combinations of these traits can enable you to assess disease. But of course, we know low testosterone for many is a very bad thing as well. So we look at the other side. So remember, we've talked about high IGF, but low IGF's negative. We've talked about in terms of development and growth. Testosterone, there's this Goldilocks zone, and you can start to pick out where you sit within the Goldilocks zone of good levels, but not too high, not too low. And yeah, we look at lots of different pathways and processes on our site to help with your wellness journey, your apolitical wellness journey.
You can come and join the sales team anytime, Stu.
Yeah, go on, thank you.
And interestingly, touch on testosterone as well, because I know that you guys are doing a bit of research into that at the moment, so it might be a topic that we pick up quite soon.
Yes, so we'll probably do a podcast on it actually, but we've been looking at sex hormone binding globulin, and then a lot of the suite of different variants that can then predict how over time your free testosterone, your total testosterone levels can alternate in men. Also, we can look at it in women in terms of relationship to polycystic ovary syndrome. So we're looking at these research bases at the minute. So again, this is certain chronic conditions such as PCOS, but also for both the guys and the girls, long-term testosterone levels that can have very significant impacts on your health.
All of that to come.
Exciting.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll let you get on with the reading around testosterone and see you back here next time as well.
Cheers, Alex.
Cheers, bye-bye.